G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and today I want to look at the special rules that I don't like in 30k. Explain why I don't like them, how I would fix them, and, some general little nigglies that just annoy me. So, many of these rules, as you're going to discover, are useless, pretty much hardly ever happen, are outright inferior to basically an identical rule that something else has, that kind of thing. Therefore, I think it shouldn't exist or should be radically changed up from what it is. Now, first one of these, of course, is Brotherhood of Psykers. This one comes up because as a Thousand Suns player of many, many years, I find that, a Brotherhood of Psykers is simply better than a character. You see, in a Thousand Suns army, you could just make a single psychic character, take a Pride of the Legion, Rite of War, and you'll be running around with Brotherhood of Psykers on multiple units. Many abilities actually affect units as a whole, and many Psykers can't cast abilities that buff units on other units. There are a few exceptions to this, but most of them, like Biomancy, for example. Iron Arm. What is better? Giving Iron Arm, for example, which will be +3 strength, +3 toughness, to one Psyker with just 2 wounds and 3 attacks, or giving that to a unit of, say, 10 Terminators with Power Fists. I think you see where I'm coming from here. That is clearly the superior option. Brotherhood of Psykers is better than being a Psyker. Also, you pay 25 points to upgrade a unit to a Brotherhood of Psykers unit. That means however many models are in it, 10, 5, 20, doesn't really matter. It doesn't scale based on the size of the unit. But you pay the same amount of points for one mastery level on an independent character. Therefore, how can this be a balanced rule? You look at something like the Sekman, considered by many to be one of the most broken units in 30k. You are talking about a Terminator unit which gets to take a mastery level of 2 on its 2 wound Terminators, which come with whichever Terminator armor you like. They will come with force weapons, this kind of thing. It can be a brutally strong unit. I mean, it's strong before you even cast psychic powers on it with those stats. That is just outright superior to coming on with another Legion, or even the Thousand Suns' own Librarians, and paying all the points to upgrade them. Therefore, Brotherhood of Psykers, in my opinion, is broken. And it's made further worse by the fact that if you suffer a Perils of the Warp, it doesn't affect the Sergeant, anything like that, it just affects a single model within the unit. So, you roll a Perils, a model gets sucked into the Warp. It's just one model. You just randomise it. Yeah, it could be like a 1 in 10 chance the Squad Sergeant goes or something, or a special weapon, that would suck. But most of the time it's just a single guy from in the unit. Contrast that with a character, multi-wound Librarian, for example, that you've paid 170 points for, because it costs a fortune to upgrade to a Librarian and give them psychic powers. They roll a Perils, doesn't matter if they're on full wounds, anything like that, could be turn 1 in the game. Snap, Thanos clicked, gone. Brotherhood of Psykers needs to be changed, and I think the best way of doing it is honestly complete rewrite. Not only of the psychic phase, but how it works for a unit of Psykers as opposed to an individual Psyker. Because either it's going to be made more powerful by the fact there's more models, like with the old way that horrors used to work, it scales based on number of models a unit, where, 5 models it was like Mastery 1, 10 models Mastery 2, 15 plus was Mastery 3, something like that. That could be a way of doing it. But right now, it's all benefits, no negatives, which is not a good rule in my opinion. Alright, moving on. Duelists Edge. This is a rule that everyone forgets they have. It gives a +1 bonus to initiative on the weapon you're using in close combat. People forget it, and very few weapons have it. Why is it in there? It's just, there's no point having this special rule, basically. I get where they're coming from. They want to give it to weapons to make unique weapons, that kind of thing. At the end of the day, if it's on a unique weapon, that unique weapon will probably be on a unique unit, say Palatine Blades. Therefore, keep it on that unit. Put it in the unit description, don't go around giving it out to everyone or putting it in the main rulebook. There's no need for it, and you're probably just wasting it, to be honest. It's really the bottom of the list of special rules, but I use it as an example here, just because it is a sort of sign of the bloat. When people complain about how many special rules they are, things like Duelists Edge are what spring to my mind, where it's like, you have dedicated part of your page here just to this piddly special rule that pretty much nothing in the game uses. The only thing that comes to the top of my head is chartable sabers, I think. So yeah, not great. Next on the list, fear. Fear is one of my big two. The other one being Soul Blaze, which we'll get to later. Fear is a fucking useless rule. I don't know why it exists, but it's on Primarchs, it's on monstrous creatures, it's on whole legions like the Night Wards. And in theory it's great because, if someone makes a leadership check when you charge them, and if they fail, then they go to weapon skill 1 for the rest of that fight sub-phase. Ooh. Problem is that the average leadership in Heresy is 9. The amount you need to roll to pass that, 9 and less, is something like 88% of the time you're going to pass, something ridiculous like that. So it almost never goes off. And considering how few times Heresy actually devolves into a melee fight, when it usually does, it's usually the better units that are getting in on it. Something like Legion Terminators, Legion Veteran Squads, HQ assisted units, they're all Leadership 10. And Leadership 10 units, yeah, sure, the occasional freak happens where you roll a double sixes on the leadership check. That happens, but it's not common. And you can't make a rule and make units pay 10 to 20 points in some cases for a rule that's just so fucking useless. I mean, the Night Lords, Castellax can be upgraded with Trophies of Judgment, which gives them causes fear for 10 points a model, except the Castellax already cause fear because they're monstrous creatures. It's silly why you're paying points for this sort of thing. Fear needs to be reworked to automatically cause something like a -2 penalty for any morale unit and any morale checks the unit has to take, something like that. It's also made worse by the fact that so many units are immune to fear. They just ignore the effects of it. I think Death Guard, Ultramarines, Word Bearers, Salamanders, all these units either ignore fear or have massive buffs to their leadership checks. Get to re-roll them, get to roll 3d6 picking the lowest, that kind of thing. Custodes as a faction, immune to fear. I think the Sisters of Silence are immune to fear. Imperial Knights, never gonna come across this situation. Imperial Militia, they're gonna lose anyway in the close combat, so it doesn't matter. Maybe Solar Auxilia, you'll occasionally get this off, but a lot of them are going to be running around at Leadership 9 thanks to their characters. And of course, Mechanicum. Mechanicum is just full of stubborn and fearless stuff throughout. Lots of monstrous creatures again. Thalax are generally not the people you're going to be getting into close combat with. You're going to be getting into close combat with things like Vorax, Castellax, Domitar, all of those big units that just don't care that you cause fear. So yeah, fear as a rule, shit, absolutely shit, and you shouldn't be paying points for it. If you get it for free, that's fine. Something like Trophies of Judgment for Night Lords should be adding something like cause fear and a -1 or -2 to enemy morale. So if you do win those close combats, you've got a greater chance of getting a runs down results, something like that. But as a rule, I don't know why Forge World invests so many points in it. They think that this is some great rule that just wins fucking games, and it doesn't. It's fucking shit. Alright, Destroyer Weapons. My big problem with Destroyer Weapons is the Death Blow special rule, because you get no saves of any kind. That's a bizarre rule. In a universe where shields and force fields and that kind of thing exist, I get it. What they're trying to say is the weapon is just so powerful it doesn't matter what field you've got. Well, the thing is, it's not very fun and engaging. If someone actually rolls the death blow and they just remove something like a Primarch from play, or they just instantly kill, Spartans, that kind of thing, it's not very fulfilling. It's not engaging gameplay. It is not fun to be on the receiving end of for anyone who's ever suffered it. It's just a dick thing. D6 plus 6 wounds, that kind of thing. Yeah, I'd be happy to take that. That's not what sucks. What sucks is that you can't save, honestly. And that's one of those weird things, like, you know, if a Titan fires at you and there's another Titan in the way, it doesn't matter, no cover save, anything like that, it doesn't hit the other Titan, it just hits the unit they aimed at, you know, with like a Shadow Sword or something. That's not right. You're going through another unit, you know, to hit something. It's just bad rules writing, in my opinion, because it's just, there's no solution to this. There's no escaping it. You could have a unit that's hidden from line of sight and the shot just scatters onto them, you know. It's not a great rule. It's not fun and engaging. It's one of those things that just ruins the games, and it leads to that horrible situation where people are going, hang on a minute, why are super heavies so fucking powerful, especially when some of them, you know, are smaller than non-super heavy units or the same size as them, and they're getting rules like this. That's not very fair, especially for the points paid, and I'm in that boat myself. So I would change the death blow out of all of those, just that it allows saves still. And we're talking invulnerable and cover saves here, because yeah, cover is still a thing. You may have the most powerful gun in the universe, but again, fire it at a mountain. If you can't remove the whole mountain, how are you going to kill the unit on the other side of it? That's just how I look at it. So yeah, destroyer weapons, they need a slight fix there. Alright, it will not die. This rule will not go off. I almost put Battlesmith in here because the fact that your rerolls are so mediocre is not great, but I thought it will not die is a better representation because there's just no buffing it. It just is what it is. And it is a rare rule, and it's a rule you always forget. I know so many people who will be able to turn around and say they know exactly where I'm coming from here. They'll have something like Blessed Auto Simulacra on their units, on their vehicles, or they'll have this rule on their monstrous creatures. They play through the game, and then their monstrous creature dies, and then 2 turns later they go, oh wait, I had it will not die. I could have been rolling in my shooting phases to see if he got a wound back. Fuck. It's not great. Okay? It's a rule that's easy to forget, and easy to forget rules are never great rules because it means that they're not engaging the player in some way. That means they're not core or fundamental to you. And if they're not core or fundamental to you, then it's probably not needed or it's not working as it should. I think a great example of this is things like monstrous creatures, which again we'll get to. They have so many special rules, you forget most of them. And when they do come up, you're like, oh, wait, that's a thing? So that's why It Will Not Die makes the list. It needs to be better. Either it comes off on a 4+, and at that point, hey, it's a 50-50 whether I'm getting a wound or a weapon or something back. A wound or a hull point. That's good. That's something you'll remember. But on a 5+, going off, 30% of the time, at best, you're gonna forget it. It's not that important. Plus, it's not done when you suffer the wound. That would probably be the best way of allowing people to remember that it's a thing, is as soon as you suffer a wound, make the It Will Not Die roll to see if that wound is recovered immediately, like a Feel No Pain. But as it stands right now, it's a worse Feel No Pain that you take in a different sequence of the game, and therefore you forget it. And it's not very good anyway. Night Vision, like the Duelist Edge, never affects you, never comes off, never happens. Almost never do you play night fight games. And when you do, it's only if it's going to be like first turn of the game, for example, and then the rest of the game is going to be normal. It won't affect you because that maximum long-range gun duel in the first turn is usually the most pathetic gun duel of the game because, you're sitting 24 inches plus away from each other. Everyone's hiding their tanks and units behind buildings. Everyone rushes out in the second turn of the game or in their own first turn. Therefore, Night Vision, not a great rule. It just, again, doesn't come into play very often. Plus, the effects of night fighting, the cover bonuses, that kind of thing, are just so minute. Just don't bother with it unless you're going to make night fighting really important. Skyfire. How is it I can have something like a gigantic machine gun nest with, like 850 cals, as a weird example. A whole bunch of machine guns strapped together like a Skyfire defense line. And I'm firing them at an aircraft. And I can shoot the fuck out of something doing Mach 3. But then some reason, I try and lower this thing down, and I start shooting at, a horde of infantry marching across the battlefield like a fucking set of redcoats in the American Revolutionary War. And I just can't hit them. doesn't seem right to me. And there's a flip side to this. Let's pretend you don't have the Skyfire special rule and you're shooting at a flyer. If you're a Marine on foot and you fire a rocket launcher at a lightning, 6s to hit. What if that same Marine with his heavy weapon ran that turn, or he moved? He moved 6 inches, now he can only snap fire his heavy weapon. Looks up the flyer, oh, can only snap fire. There is no additional penalty. What the fuck's going on there? It's a 6 to hit whether the Marine moves or doesn't. So he can literally fire that fucking rocket the wrong direction over his shoulder and he's just as likely to hit the flyer as if he sits down, takes careful aim at it. Are you saying the flyer is going that fast? Well, how the fuck does that work? If the flyer only moved 18 inches, and I have jet bikes that move 30 inches, so almost double that, how come they're getting hit on 3s still? Or 2s, or whatever ballistic skill the units are that are shooting at them, but that flyer is somehow hit just as easily by Skyfire weapons, but can't be hit by ground weapon shooting. None of the flying rules make sense, is what I'm getting at here. I hate them. And Skyfire is just an example of that, where it's like, you have a great anti-air unit. I mean, I understand kind of with anti-air missiles, saying that, you know, these are missiles and they're walking onto like heat sources, that kind of thing, but, you know, if you fire something like a Stinger missile at a tank, it's just as good at hitting the tank as it is at hitting a helicopter or something, you know? It's just not going to hit the tank in the ideal spot, but it's going to see the heat the thing's putting out and track it because it's a heat-seeking missile. It doesn't need to be specifically calibrated to shoot at. Not that I would suggest doing it. So it's a whole bunch of rules around the flying sub-phase or sub-movement value that really needs to be tweaked. And Skyfire is just symptomatic of the whole problem and the example I'm choosing to use. Alright, slow and purposeful. Another example of a special rule that there are just a better version of. That being relentless. So, slow and purposeful is relentless, but you lose the ability to run, turbo boost, move flat out, sweeping advance, or overwatch. So, in my opinion, why don't you give units relentless, and then slow and purposeful would just be added to relentless as its own thing. You would get rid of everything from the word however onwards. So, however they can shoot with heavy salvo and ordnance weapons, counting stationary even they moved in the previous movement. Just remove that whole part, and just make the rule, a unit with at least one model with this rule can't run, turbo boost, move flat out, or sweeping advance, or overwatch. Cool. Nice, short, sharp, simple, succinct, you name it. Right now though, big long rule that basically boils down to, this is a much worse version of relentless. Therefore, terrible. Soul Blaze. Just like Fear, it's the sort of probably the number one rule that Forge Guild gives to units. Also Castellax at KR, a lot of pyromancy psychic powers. Your unit suffers a wound from this, you put a marker on them. So first you've got to dig out a marker from your dice box or whatever. And then you've got to remember, the end of each turn, to roll a d6 for each unit with a Soul Blaze counter on it. Now you're not putting multiple counters on them, you just have a counter on the unit. You roll a dice, and on a 3 or less, nothing happens. On a 4+, the unit takes D3, Strength 4, AP 5 hits with ignores cover. Randomly allocated. When the fuck does this ever work? You made 1000 Suns plasma cannons 10 points more expensive per model just to get this rule. If you shoot a unit with multiple plasma cannons, the unit is dead, or it's so tough that D3 Strength 4 AP 5 hits that have a 50% chance of even happening in the first place are not going to affect it. And, like with It Will Not Die, it's happening out of sequence. You're not performing it as soon as the Blaze token is applied. You're performing it later on down the line. That means you forget it, or you go, fuck, what's that dice represent? I don't know, and you just pick the dice back up off the board. And then you're like, oh wait, that was my Soul Blaze token. That was going to be really fucking effective. It was never going to be effective. It's a terrible rule. This is one where I'm not even like, oh well, you know, we could tweak it and modify it and make it better. No, just remove it. remove it from the game. It's bad. You know, you'd have to change it so significantly to make it viable. It's just not worth it. You know, if you were gonna take a stab at trying to make this viable, it would just be, as soon as a unit is soul blazed, it'd be like Volkite weaponry. You just take D3 Strength 4 OP5 hits straight away. No rolling for it, no placing counters, and it would also be resolved on the spot. It wouldn't keep going turn after turn after turn for the rest of the game. It would be silly, because it's something you've got to keep track of that isn't improving the gameplay for either player. Again, fun and engaging. Things that are fun and engaging is mechanics that your brain can work around, which come straight to your mind. And what do I mean by this? So, if you can understand how something works, where it occurs from, what the counter to it is, how to stop it from occurring, that's great, that's engaging. When something is randomly happening to you, it may or may not go off, that kind of randomness has the opposite effect where people get disengaged and they don't care for it. This is one of those rules. Twin Linked. Twin Linked makes the list because I've had a lot of problems with it for a very long time, and I really like what they do with 8th edition 40k in Twin Linked. Because look at this. When you're firing a Twin Linked weapon, you're getting rerolls to hit. Unless it's a template. On a template, it's rerolls to wound and reroll failed armor pen. That is a massive difference. One of those is exponentially better than the other. I think Twin Linked should be changed to wound rolls. That way it's universal across the board. Twin Linked blast weapons get to reroll to wound. Twin Linked las cannons get to reroll to wound. Twin Linked template weapons already reroll to wound. It's different to the others because obviously it automatically hits. Therefore it became a case they went, well, Twin Linked has to do something. What does it do? Oh, it rerolls to wound. Well, why don't you make it universal across the board? Because the amount of time someone has fired a las cannon, they're like, oh, it's like, 3s to hit, 2s to wound. They roll a 1 to wound, they're like, oh, fuck. Yeah, it's a big deal. And blasts and templates, they're scattering. What happens when you roll a hit? Oh, no effect from having Twin Linked. Oh, look, I hit. Oh, no Twin Linked applies. So the fact you've paid all these points for a Twin Linked blast of some description, and you get no benefit out of it. That's crap. You shouldn't be paying points for something that gives you 0 benefit. And again, your scatter has to be significantly over 4 inches, the standard ballistic skill of 30k, before you even have to worry about the fact that it's Twin Linked. And even then, unless you roll something ridiculously crazy and uncommon, like a double 6, you're going to hit your target still in some capacity. Therefore, Twin Linked blast, Twin Linked las cannons, that kind of thing, reroll to wound instead of rerolling to hit. Oh, and rerolling armor penetration rolls. It would make things like las cannons so much more effective in the anti-tank role. Because right now people aren't taking things like las cannons to kill tanks, shooting land raiders at land raiders, for example, because it's like, yeah, you can hit them, but the hitting's the easy part. You're trying to roll 2s and 3s most of the time, thanks to ballistic skill 5 being very prevalent or easy to give to units. 2s and 3s are very easy to roll compared to trying to roll 5s and 6s to get a penetrating hit on another land raider or a Spartan. So therefore, Twin Linked should be reroll to wound, reroll armor penetration rolls across the board. Alright. Monstrous creatures. They can fire 2 weapons in the shooting phase, fine. They have fear, fine. They're a giant, scary monster, no worries. Why doesn't a Dreadnought have fear? It's the same size. They have Hammer of Wrath. Fine, Dreadnoughts have Hammer of Wrath. They have move through cover. Okay, fine. Again, why don't Dreadnoughts? They're just as big, and a lot of these monstrous creatures are a lot more clunky than Dreadnoughts as well. They're not graceful creatures that are gently squirming through the terrain, they're just walking through it like a fucking giant tank. I bring up monstrous creatures because right now, over vehicles, it's nothing but buffs. And again, got a point to 40k 8th edition here and Age of Sigmar, decreasing performance statistics over time on the unit as it gets damaged. Very important in my opinion. Relentless. Fine. Smash. Well, again, why can't a Dreadnought have Smash? A Mortis Dreadnought exchanging all its attacks for just one single strength 10 stomp? I think that'd be fair. But Okay, it's all monstrous creatures that go that way. Alright, flying monstrous creatures. This here is the biggest bugbear I have with all of the movements, that kind of thing in the game. What you have here is something that moves only 12 inches. For some reason, very hard to hit. In fact, it has a rule called hard to hit. It's such a difficult target for you to hit without specialized weapons. Shots at it can only be resolved as snapshots unless the weapon has a Skyfire special rule, which again, a heat-seeking missile being shot at one of these is going to hit it on 2s. And yet that same heat-seeking missile shot at, I don't know, a skimmer flying past with a giant jet engine hanging out the back. It's like, nah, fuck, can only hit that on 6s, champ. It's stupid. These things break the immersion, they're dumb rules. And it's not really a balancing mechanic, because you're not making the game more balanced by having a monstrous creature that's so ridiculously hard to hit. Now, you've got the speeds it's moving. A swooping monstrous creature must move at least 12 inches and can move up to 24. That's less than a jet bike. A jet bike moves 12, but can move up to 30 inches. 12 and 24 is the same as just a marine outrider bike. So, its swooping monstrous creature is moving no faster than a lot of units, in fact slower than many units. Most skimmers are moving 12 inches. Straight off the bat, land speeders. So, why is it that for some reason a monstrous creature is hard to hit if it's flying? That's dumb. Plus, it's a huge object. Much bigger than a jet bike. Look at the size of a Demon Prince or a Bloodthirster. Or one of those gargantuan Bloodthirster models if you're using it. Yeah, you're hitting that thing with bolt guns easily. The whole thing that swooping and vector striking with them, it's just... ugh. How come this thing swoops over a flyer, and the flyer is going at something ridiculous like Mark 3? You know, it's like an SR-70 on Blackbird. This thing is just screaming through the atmosphere. This fucking bird gets in the way of it, hits the flyer gets all mangled and fucked up, and the bird's just like, I'm fine. My legs didn't get torn off by hitting something moving that fast. No, not at all. You know, look what happens when a real bird hits a plane. There's no bird left. Doesn't matter how big or small the plane is, it ain't great for the bird. A flying monstrous creature, whether it's a demon, whether it's a Mechanicum construct, you know, why is it a Vulturax from the Mechanicum flying monstrous creature, which is basically an aircraft and probably should be a vehicle, not a monstrous creature? How come that thing can collide with a lightning or something and the two don't just explode upon one another? That should be the outcome of that situation. You try and vector strike something like that, you both get hit. Okay? There should be a counter for these things. If you vector strike a unit on the ground, that unit should have some way of striking back at you. Because again, if you're a swooping flyer and you're swooping down at a unit, it doesn't matter how fast you're coming in at them. You swoop a group of Marines like a bird swooping a person, they're going to see it coming. And if you're a giant flying demon and you're swooping at them, bet your ass those Marines are going to start firing some bolt guns at you. And you're getting so close that you can physically touch them. How the fuck can they miss you? This is the thing. Why is these only being hit on 6s? Why is this snap shooting? This is a bad rule. It needs to be completely rewritten. How would you fix flying monstrous creatures? You make them jump infantry. Get rid of the whole flying aspect. Get rid of the whole they swoop flyers bullshit. No, they're jump infantry. They're a jump monstrous creature. Get rid of the fly ability. You're complicating the game. It's a rule that got introduced, I think it was 7th edition, not even 6th, it was 7th edition they brought this rule in 40k. The game was fine all the way to 6th edition and 1st edition Horus Heresy without this shit. And now they've added it, the game is not better for it. I don't hear people going, wow, you know, that game I just played against that demon army would have been so much better if they could just punch me in the dick more with those flying monstrous creatures. I feel like, as the opposition to that, I would have had a more enjoyable game being unable to do anything about that flying monstrous creature that could just swoop my units with impunity. It doesn't happen. And then you've got these grounded tests. And the problem with the grounded tests is, it has no rules about what happens when you have groups of creatures that are moving together. So it's like, okay, I have 3 flying monstrous creatures like Vulturax, and one of them gets grounded. What happens to the rest of the Voltrax? Do they just fuck off on their own now, or are they stuck on the spot there with their mate? Oh, he just returns back to swooping next turn? The rules are poorly thought out. They've just been carbon copied over with no forethought from the old rulebook for 7th edition 40k and not fixed. See, if you remove rules like this and make them better, then you wouldn't have the complaints that people have like, oh, 7th edition was just so hard, 8th edition's so much easier as a rule set. No, 7th edition is a surprisingly easy to work with rule set. But as you can see from the examples I'm citing today, there are rules which just make no sense, are convoluted needlessly, and they don't add anything to the game. And if your rules aren't adding anything to the game, why are they there? Anyway, that's my little rant for today. I hope you all got something out of it. I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. Please, name the special rules you dislike, or the ones you think I got wrong here today, and give me your reasoning in the comments below. Actually bounce your feedback off me. Say, hey Macca, I actually think that swooping monstrous creatures really adds something to the game. Or I really think that Slime Purposeful adds something to the game. And not just like one little niche thing. I mean, like, here's a whole host of examples where it's a really good special rule. That I'd be interested in. Anyway, I'll see you all next time.